So I'm down at Barton Moss, which is where iGas is doing their exploratory digging for shale gas with the intention of fracking here. And I'm going to be interviewing Tina Rotheray, who in the last few weeks has really very much brought me up to speed on fracking and the risks of fracking. So I thought if I could do an interview with her here, you'd all find that really useful too. Hey Tina.
Hi.
Thanks for spending some time with me. So we're just stood here, just so people can see, that is actually, that's the site in the distance, right?
Yeah.
How far is that from where we're stood just now?
Oh no, 500 yards.
500, you can't quite see it through the trees there, but it's just there. And we're actually at the front gates as well, where the police are. So, like, Tina, tell me, like, why are we here?
I don't know, I preferred it when we were somewhere prettier.
Yeah.
And we were wearing ball gowns.
I preferred that too, because
Yes.
we did meet at the Beavers through the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Tina was one of the judges for the Beavers. She's now pulled out because North West Lancs Chamber have actually got Quadrilla, who are one of the fracking companies, as a major sponsor. So you have pulled out. But that's kind of how we met, was back in the Beavers. But here we are at Barton Moss. Wellies on. Like, I don't think anyone can even believe that I'm actually here doing this. Like, why are we here? Why are we at Barton Moss today?
Right, well, there's several ways of trying to draw attention to the subject of fracking, shale gas extraction. And it's really important to hit it on every front. You know, there are people dealing with this, academics doing studies into it. There are people dealing with it on a legal level. There are other people having public information meetings. And all of those contribute to spreading awareness. But while we're spreading awareness, the companies that want to do the drilling are going ahead and proceeding. And even though they're not at the fracking stage yet, they're currently at the drilling stage, which also causes considerable harm and presents risks to this community. So what the protecting sites do is the protectors, they're not protesters, they're not protesting, they're protecting. And they come here, and every day when the trucks arrive, they slow them down. It would probably take maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes for a truck to cover the length of this road.
Yeah.
But it takes 3/4 of an hour to 90 minutes, depending on what the police are like that day, to slow them down. So why do we do that? What purpose does that serve?
Well, I was just going to ask you another question, actually, Tina.
Yeah.
Because actually, you know, fracking is new to me. I really only got involved at the Freckleton Council meeting, and is that too difficult for you to see me?
Better, yeah.
The Freckleton Council meeting, when I discovered that fracking was going to happen probably in my village. And I started researching it and didn't even know what fracking was, never heard of it before, or heard the word, certainly didn't know what it was and what it did, and had no idea about the huge risks that were involved in it. So can you just quickly explain what fracking even is? Because people watching this don't even know what fracking is.
Let's describe one frack.
Yeah.
But keep in the back of your mind that for the Fylde Coast Peninsula, they want no less than 800 wells. So you take one well and you frack it once.
Like this here?
Yep. But you've got to frack it 13 times roughly. So each time you frack, you take about 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. You mix in 1% of bad chemicals, still a vast quantity. You put that into the mixture along with some sand, which they call a proppant. They then fire that down about 2 miles underground where they've drilled and 2 miles horizontally out. So they then blast through at atomic pressure this high volume hydraulic fracturing of the shale gas, the shale rock. So when you blast the shale rock, it sends little fractures. Those little fractures are held open by the sand. And that sand then allows the gas to flow freely. The gas then flows back up. It's actually not work intensive. It takes about 6 weeks to do this.
Well, hold on, that sounds pretty good to me, like releasing gas from the earth. That sounds like a pretty useful thing to be doing.
I thought so too. When I first read the brochure, I thought it sounded fantastic. Homegrown, local, hours, surely the revenue's ours, reduce your emissions on the fact that you haven't got to travel with it. But then you've got to look at what else is there. So yes, if you burn shale gas or you burn coal, there is less CO2 likely to happen with shale gas. However, it isn't just CO2 we have to worry about methane. And there is considerably more methane emission with shale gas, not just at the burning stage, but at the extraction stage. Also, the process of producing shale gas, as you've seen by the volume of trucks, for just the drilling, they require 350 to 500 vehicle movements per frac.
Wow.
Remembering 800 wells, 13 fracs a well. So it's energy intensive. So they're not counting the CO2 emissions from all that vehicular traffic or anything like that, or the transportation, or the turning the gas into LPG, or the fact that we will export this stuff. We don't dictate what stays here in our country. We can't call it our gas. We're on a European market. We don't dictate the price. We don't dictate where it goes. We sell to the highest bidder and buy at the lowest price. It's just the way the market works. So they've drilled down, they've fractured, the gas flows. Then they have to do it again and again and again until they empty that of gas. In the process of doing that, they've drilled down through agricultural land, groundwater, aquifer where there's a huge amount of water, and then a really important thing up here where we are in Lancashire, an area called the Manchester Marl, which is pretty impermeable, amazing rock formation between the shale and the water. And that protects us beautifully and has done since the birth of the earth. However, we've now drilled through that, and we've drilled down and we've drilled along. So let's assume the frack job goes well, but 1 in 6 of them won't. Because
how do you know that?
Because that's an industry book report by a company called Schlumberger. Look them up. Schlumberger is one of the biggest drillers in the world. They produced a private industry report that sadly fell out of the back of the truck and got posted online. And it states very clearly, at the wellhead, right up here at the top, where there's no Manchester Marl protecting that water, 1 in 6 wellheads will fail in the first year.
Gosh.
100% of wellheads will fail over time.
What's the impact of a wellhead failing? Like,
Right.
what happens?
Well, you haven't got any. So when they say fracking will not harm your aquifer, they're talking about the teeny bit of the process called fracking. Up here at the wellhead, where they load the chemical water, they take out vast quantities of waste. We haven't even talked about that yet. They take out all the waste. Anything that happens there that gets into your groundwater affects your agriculture. So let's take Lancashire. We produce cabbages and Lancashire cheese. So our dairy herds feed on the grass, and we find out that's got contaminated with any one of the substances that came from the chemicals or the radioactivity that comes up. So then all of a sudden it's Lancashire cheese is no good, there's a contaminant. There's a whole industry. We look what happens with eggs. You know, it doesn't take much to spook the public. And the same way with the cabbages and so on. So there's a huge risk up there. When a wellhead fails, and they all will, the reason they fail is they've got steel piping and then cement casing, steel piping, cement casing at the top level. Once you get further down, it's single casing. But if you look at the side of your house where your pointing is, you have to redo that every once in a while. Otherwise your house falls down. So let's assume that they've done all the fracking, they close the well, they walk away. They won't come back and check. Quadrilla and iGas are not in the business of safety. They're in the business of profit, like most businesses. So therefore it is not in their best interest to come back every year to check the integrity of that well is still holding. Because after they've left, when they do that one frack I was talking about, with 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools go down, only 2 come back. Those 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools that come
What
back,
happens to the rest of the fluid?
good question. And I'd
This
say
is what I've been mostly concerned
2.5
about.
years I have been asking the question.
Yeah.
Now, there's a directive out of Europe called the EU Mining Waste Directive. Really important directive. What that dictates is that for 20 years, over a 30-mile radius, you must, as a producer of water waste, monitor that. How do they do that? You require a 3D seismic survey. They can't afford to do that. That makes this unprofitable.
Is the water that they're pushing down there, is it toxic?
It's clean, fresh, our water in vast quantities. Remember, just in the Far Peninsula, 800 wells, 13 fracks a well, each one requiring 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools of good water. So 4 go down with chemicals already making them undrinkable and they require treatment. When you hit shale level, you pick up something called norms, which are naturally occurring radioactive
Yeah, I
materials.
heard about this.
Radium, cesium, and all sorts of other things. So it picks that up because it's naturally occurring down there, was never meant to be near you and me. So then that comes up with the 2 that come back up with the waste, 2 Olympic balls. It's now got radioactivity. So now it has to be treated as radioactive waste as well. They dumped the last lot in the Manchester Strip Canal because they hadn't put legislation in place yet to protect us. Now they've realised what it contains, it's now got to abide by different permits. This place will, even though they're just drilling, they're not fracking, when they drill down, they produce drill chippings and mud. And drilling mud is also toxic. It's been down there, it's got the norms, and it's had some chemical infusion. Not as much chemical as you'll get with fracking. That's up to 600 chemicals available.
So for someone like me who really doesn't understand all this, is it dangerous?
Ask yourself how you feel about each time they frack, they take at least 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water to our water cycle. You know, every one of us learned in school as a kid, it rains, it evaporates, it rains, it evaporates. When you've shoved it 2 miles under, infused it with chemicals and allowed it to pick up radioactivity, you've essentially removed that from the water table.
Yeah.
And this is happening at hundreds of thousands of wells. It just seems an insane prospect. If that doesn't scare you, worry about the 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools that do come back that are contaminated. And where are they going to put those? There's a new process, and Remsol in Lancashire is talking about it. They're saying, and again, watch the wording, we can reduce the radioactivity of the liquid waste by 90%. Now that's marvellous.
That would be pretty cool, right? That would make it safe. Yeah.
They're that clever.
Right.
So everyone goes, well, that's great. But the next question that you need to ask is, where did it go?
Where did it go?
Where did it go? Well, what we did was we made cake. We made solid cake. Remsol means removal of solids. And what they did was they removed the solids, captured the radioactive waste, and they made a cake. And they're going to stick that in your landfill.
Well, that definitely is a cake I don't want to be eating.
Yes.
Tina, listen, thank you so much for sharing that, first of all, and also for bringing me here today and allowing me to experience this. Just one final question, like, why are you doing this? Like, I mean, I get that this seems pretty crazy, but like, why are you investing so much of your time and energy?
It says grandma at work. In 30 years, I will be dead, which is fine. I won't have to drink the water. But my granddaughter is 9 years old right now. Who will make sure it's okay for her? So when we abandon these wells, we lock down the water that we've contaminated. When the methane emissions are in her air and the cancer rates go up, and I leave that for her, how dare I? I don't consider this something I do willingly. I consider this a no choice, no choice. It is my obligation as someone who has produced a future generation to ensure I don't leave the place a mess.